Hello everyone, welcome to Lecture 2 TLDR. Hopefully this week will be more TLDR than last week. So this week we're going to be looking at Lecture 2 material, which finishes off the HTML component of this course. And just so you know, the Tute and Lab materials that reflect the content of today's lecture will be in Tute and Lab number 3. So if you haven't done so already, just click on Lectures, make sure HTML2 is selected. And what we're looking now is looking not so much at previous versions of HTML, we're looking at the current version of HTML, which is currently the version number 5. So, I'm going to look at multimedia, and previously, before HTML5 became a very strong standard, multimedia had to be embedded using third-party plugins. And last week we did look at Flash, which is a very nice visual way of presenting web pages that were very popular in the very late 90s and early 2000s. But these days, what we do see is that let me just remember what I got there. Oh yeah, this is not an ad. I was just wondering what I put in here. So the working group and the W3C organization realized that we did need to have some built-in elements that replaced the need for these third-party plugins. So first of all, we've got a tag here. This is the general sort of object data tag. Data equals whatever the resource is. And, you know, this is a fairly good one, I suppose, if you're ever embedding sort of third-party software. The object tag can be expanded to include basically, this is, how do I say this? This is, if you like, the first choice. Like I really want the viewer to see my SWF. It's a Flash, the Flash movie thing. I've forgotten what SWF actually stands for, which is embarrassing. So just imagine you've prepared this car ad and it looks wonderful. And then, okay, well, if Flash isn't embedded, then I'll fall back and provide this movie of the car. And let's just imagine for some reason that's not embedded, then, well, maybe this GIF image. Most browsers have GIF images support. They've had that since 1995 or so. And if they're reading using a screen reader or something, then there's a hyperlink to the web page. Please buy this car. So the object tag has got a series of fallbacks. I think that's what I was looking for before. Put your first choice first, a bit like voting, if anyone voted recently, and then your second choice, third choice, etc. But in HTML5, oops, sorry, I keep jumping ahead. But if you can't be bothered with all this, there is this old lightweight element which has never actually been a part of the HTML standard. And I've got a little bit of information just here. Embed source equals and whatever the content is. And basically, there's no fallback to this. So what happened was in the 90s, this wasn't a thing. And so Netscape and Internet Explorer, I believe, created this tag. And it's been an unofficial part of the standard for a very, very long time. So even though it's not part of the standard, browsers would implement the embed tag. And just sort of giving in, just to give you an idea of how piecemeal development of the standards has been, this was only an official part of the standard until HTML5. So very, very much overdue. So as I said, HTML5 has got native support for multimedia elements. And if you have a HTML5 compliant browser and you want to actually put that on your sticker, it has to support a certain amount of multimedia. So if you've got some audio, you can pop it in some audio tags and give it an ID, just so we can refer to it later. And its source is an audio file. Preload auto, that's good for non-mobiles, I'll say. You might want to think about that. And if you want controls, so here are some controls here. Put in controls. So in XHTML, you would say controls equals controls in quotes. But HTML5, you can just say controls, and that's like controls equals true. Now, if the browser doesn't support that audio file for whatever reason, or it's unavailable, you've got this fallback, no sound for you. So that's like the fallback if there's any problems. So I'll let you click on these buttons just to have a little play, and you can pause them, rewind them. I'll play this one, but I can sort of rewind it to there. And got the volume there. I'm not sure what that is. Oh, you can even download it. How cute. Now, we will be looking at this in later lectures. You can also wire up JavaScript to trigger sounds. So if you want to poke this kitten with your mouse, it triggers this audio element. If you want to stroke the kitten, so if you have a mouse wheel, just move the mouse wheel and it starts purring. And if you want to drag the kitten somewhere, it'll get very agitated. As I said, we'll be looking at this in more detail in the JavaScript section. And video element, if you want to show a video, and I'll play that. It's New Year's Eve. You can, very similar, you've got a controls attribute. Just mute the sound there. Again, source, where on your file system is this located? So this is inside app/video/. Okay, well that's the folder that's in, and that's the name of the file. And because it's visual, you can also pop in this width and height. Now I know these look like styling attributes, which, if you remember from last week, shouldn't be permitted, but images and movies are permitted. When I say movies, I mean video, are permitted this element, just so that the browser knows how much space to reserve for that element in a slow loading, over a slow loading connection. And again, there's a bit of a fallback, no video for you, or you might want to put a more useful message there if there's no support for that video. Oh, there it is. So just to reiterate there, height and width are allowed. Just make sure you don't put in px or centimeters or percent or anything. It's purely the number of pixels that the browser has to reserve to pop that content inside. Any other kind of width and height, please use CSS, which we'll be looking at next week. So these two elements you can loop if you want to be annoying, but there may be a practical reason why you want to do that. It's a good idea to set the volume. There's so many web pages that just play video, and you've got to try and find it. And even Apple are sort of building in override support to stop their customers from being annoyed by such things. So got a full list here. Goes to W3 schools. So lots lots of toys, buffered, controller, all sorts of things. Okay. Video again allows you to pop in some, choices. So that's your first choice. If that's unavailable, you can pop in a second one, and a plain text message if that's not working as well. So a little bit more sophisticated if this wasn't enough for you. So you can probably pop an image in there as well. I should really pop that in just so that's clear. Now another thing, there's this something vector graphics. Oh my goodness, Scalable. Thank you. I'm glad I write things out. Scalable vector graphics. So you can actually, if you actually look closely, this is not actually an image. It's actually made up of polygons. So these, no matter how closely you zoom in on this shape, it will always be in focus, and so you don't have to have 100, you don't have to like have, say, a 3 megabyte image there to be clear. You can actually draw simple graphics using SVG. This is not part of the course, but I do know some of you may be interested in this sort of stuff, so I like to include it. And also I like students to know that it does exist. So if you're designing logos and you want to export that as an SVG rather than as a JPEG or something, it is possible to embed these things in your pages. Now, there's quite a nice program called Inkscape, which I use, and its SVG is very efficient. It's not bloated like some Photoshop-like or Adobe Illustrator-like programs can bloat content. This was supposed to be a surprise. That's supposed to be blank. Let me just refresh the page. I think I just spoilt the surprise there. In HTML5, there is this thing called the canvas element, and this allows you to draw 2D and also 3D graphics. So if anyone's done any 3D, Web 3D courses that may be running at RMIT, this is the sort of basis that we draw graphics in the web page. So we've got a little canvas thing, and I've got a little simple sort of photo. It's not Photoshop. It's more like Microsoft Paint. And you don't have really any choices. I wanted to make this script as small as possible. So if you were interested in looking at it, it's only a couple of lines of code, and you may be inspired to do something a little bit more interesting. If you like the picture, just right click and you can save the image. But it's not, I don't know. Good luck trying to draw anything different there. So we've got a canvas. You might want to put a little message in there when it's blank, or if it's not available. And on mouse move, which is what I'm doing at the moment, I'm just calling a function that just drops some paint onto the canvas. I'll just check to see if that's still alive. It actually had a lot of pretty stuff inside. So lots of fun. Again, not part of the course, but you may find this very interesting and want to get involved. This actually works now. Close that off. Okay, so the next element is an iframe element. I'll just close this and get all that out the way. I forgot to do that earlier. Sometimes we want to bring in content from another web page into a web page, and I promise you this practice is very much frowned upon. They even say here it's not considered good practice. But just let you know, if you ever want to embed a YouTube video, it is the method that YouTube requires you to use, certainly at the time of writing. And this is so that YouTube can track views and, you know, pay their content creators some money. So now using an iframe element, obviously having a page inside another page, you can sort of pretend your false bank website is a real bank website by just including another bank's homepage in. So in HTML5, they realized this was a problem. So you can actually pop in a little bit of code into your header, into your head tag. Try and say that, not in your body tag, your head tag. And you can sort of deny anyone from being allowed to include your page as a iframe. So that's just a little bit of security if you're ever doing anything that's security conscious. And we'll be having a look at some iframes. So what I'd like to do is assignment 1, I like to bring in everybody's web page into a large sort of larger page so that everyone can see everyone else's home pages. But if you are very shy, you can pop that in. In fact, it's already there. It's actually commented out. You just need to uncomment out this code. And that will just lock off your page from being included in the class wall, so to speak. So last week, we looked at some semantic elements. So this is a little bit of a summary. So in the very first standard, web pages were just meant to be word processing, scientific, engineering-like documents. And there are two things. The tags needed to be understood by a human, but they also needed to be understood by a computer so that a search engine or web crawler could understand what was going on in your page. So if you have content in headings, it could understand they were headings. If the content was in paragraphs, it could understand it was in paragraphs. And as the concept of a web page grew, so we got tables and images and all sorts of new elements. In HTML4, we had these generic kind of like home brand containers that really didn't mean anything. It didn't have any semantic meaning, but it allowed developers to sort of group content into logical areas. And what we saw was a lot of web pages, certainly in the 2000s, we got to see things like this. It would be div id equals header, or masthead, or header stuff. And it wasn't really clear to search engines, this was the official company masthead area. So even though search engines were looking out for divs with this particular ID or class, it was very much a non-standard way of indexing your content. So HTML5, we realized, yep, we need to change this. So HTML5 has introduced a lot of tags that have semantic meanings. A lot of the time they do visually look different to humans. A lot of the times we need to add CSS to make them look different, but this is very important because most pages are being found by search engine searches. And so search engines need to understand your page as much as possible. So this is what we put our content in these days. So these are body descendants. So most pages have got a masthead area, navigation area, a main and a footer. And I just want to point out in week 1's student lab, when you pull the starting code from my Git repository, you will see that the body element has got header, nav, main, footer already inside there. And I just want to make it clear, the header element, this is not the HTML1 header element. It's very different. This was renamed head. So you have HTML, head, and body. So this is a new tag. It just happens to have the same name as the old header element in HTML version 1. So these elements go inside the body. Please make sure they stay inside the body. The starting code has them in the right place. Your job is to not break this. So if you can not break this, that'll be good. So those go inside the main, and that means that search engines can basically work out what content goes where and can understand your page a lot clearer. And what I've got is, I really should update this. I really should say a good example is RMIT's old website. It does look very different now, but I think it's a good opportunity to compare how the website used to look to what it looks like now. So if we have a look at this web page, we can sort of see this logo. That's usually associated with a masthead area. But if we look more closely, we can see this kind of looks like some sort of navigation. And this looks like navigation. That also looks like navigation. And gosh, this looks like navigation. In fact, their homepage was pretty boring, to be honest. But it was very comprehensive. If you love text, definitely the website for you. If you're more visual, not quite so good. But it did sort of have the content laid out. And what I did was, this was a very long page. Obviously, there was a lot of content. So I got a little bit creative with the circle tool in Photoshop. And I just made this wavy thing just to show what that when you scroll down to the bottom, there was this footer area. So if we think about what this looks like from a HTML5 point of view, if I click on this, what I've done is I've broken this down as best as I think it can be broken down. So the header area was definitely very short or very small compared to most websites. And there was a lot of navigation, there. We sort of see a main area. We can definitely see this is the main section of the page. It's all in the body element. Just want to make that clear. But this was definitely content that should be in a main element, even though it sort of contains more links. And HTML5 also introduced this idea of an aside element. So content that, if it was missing, your page wouldn't really be worried. In fact, a lot of these links, I think they're actually duplicated. They're just in here, just in case you miss it over here, or in all the confusion, what they've done is they put the links there, so it's more confusion. As I said, the current web page does look very different, so I recommend that you compare the two. And right down the bottom, this hasn't changed. We've got the footer area with some links here. So click here to close. So some more semantic elements. So these are generally inside the main element. I'm going to deal with the first two together because these two are quite similar. So an article is like a block of content that could stand alone. So what I like to think of is each lecture series. I believe I said this last week, but I might as well go over it again. Each lecture is an article. The whole lecture is a standalone kind of piece of content or a block of content. And what I've done is each slide is a section. So, not so much standing alone. So, I mean, a slide might be interesting to look at, but it needs to be in context with the other slides. So this is why I chose to put my slides into section elements. And I'll just show you that just in case. So the slide is a section. Inside the section, I've got a header. And look, I've got another section. So you can have sections inside sections. And the whole thing are in articles. So I'll just close that off. So I'll also think about newspapers. A newspaper will have a sports section, but they'll have many articles in that section. So you might think, well, the sports section, you can lift that out. That should be an article. And, you could be quite right, I guess. It's a little bit vague on that. But I think this is the most important thing. If you can remember this about articles, you can say sections, logically distinct, but generally a part of something bigger. As I said before, the aside here, this sort of area, it's a sort of block of content that adds detail, but not essential for understanding. And also, if you are trying to do search engine optimization, you don't want all your content competing, because extra content on a page will actually dilute search engine optimization. Google basically just flattens everything. And when I say Google, I also include Bing and other search engines. I'm not being sponsored by Google. It's just kind of hard not to say Google. And especially, like, you can imagine if you've got links to other websites or your competitor's website, for example, you may want to put them in a side so that they don't get indexed as highly as your content in the other sections. And there's something called a figure. This is like a sort of block of images or diagrams, even code samples. It's quite broad. It's called a figure, and generally these things have a figure caption. If you've seen a book, it's a little bit like these images that pop up, or these graphs that pop up, and you've got a little caption just sort of below the image. If all this is confusing, there's a really good flowchart. I do love this page. It's well written. I'll just say that. So please read this in your own time. But this is the thing I like the most. Okay, I thought that was going to open up like this. So you've got a little handy flowchart. So is it a major navigation block? Yes, it's a nav. Does it make sense on its own? Yes, it's an article. And it even gives you some examples of some appropriate things. And of course, if it doesn't really match anything, then, it must be a div. So strongly recommend coming back to the slide. Maybe, just before the exam, there may be like a little question on the exam that may ask some questions. Who knows? Who knows what the future will bring? So a pretty good flowchart to have a look at. Another thing that you'll see, and I really must update my screenshots. So as I said before, I do update these slides. So these lectures are in a details tag. So I used to have select modules. I was going to do more, but I think I didn't want this to get too big. So when you click on these are actually inside a details tag. I'm just sort of falling over myself here. So if you click on this, it sort of highlights what the whole details is. Details has the summary, so that's what's always visible. And then any other content that's inside the details. And if you don't want it to be open, you can just delete that and it will be closed. And if you want it to be open, it'll become open. So you can hard code that. You can just put in the open attribute there, and it will make sure it starts off open and waits for the user to close it. And inside here, this is basically all the links to the lectures. Okay, so look, there's the main and there's the footer. So I'll just close that. And I've got a screenshot of the code. So the code has not changed too much, really just the content and the styling is slightly different. trying to find the cough button on my Google thing. Where is it? Where's my mute button? Ah, there it is. That's better. Okay, so we've got some inline semantic elements. So these were sort of mainly block elements, but you may find that some of these are not naturally guaranteed to be block elements. So there were some existing ones, so abbreviation, strong, emphasis, quotes. So if you're quoting someone, as opposed to citing, apparently there's a difference. So these are in quotes. So some of these, you may find that, you know, to a human, there's not a lot of visual difference, but trust me, to a search engine, and this will probably become more important going forward, it's good for a computer to know that it's code and not keyboard entry or something like that, even though these two elements will probably render very similar. So, some extra stuff's been put in. So citation. So if you're now citing the title of the work, that's what cite is for, as opposed to quoting someone. Mark, if you want to mark or highlight text, that's a way of doing it. I'm not sure whether I've put in some CSS here, so I just want to check. Oh, this is good. This is actually the browser. So we will see this very soon. So this is actually the default browser style to highlight something yellow. But if you want to overwrite that, okay. Normally you can click on this and change it. That's not happening today. So that's because these are the browser styles. So, but if I wanted to, I could say background color. I am jumping through to CSS. My apologies. So let's just say you liked, I don't know, aquamarine. You can change it to aquamarine, or I don't know, blue, purple, whatever floats your boat. So, but the default style, certainly in Chrome, is the style at yellow. So that's handy. Now meter, this one I'm not really 100% sold on. Contains a rating such as a movie review. I promise you, I have copied this from the spec, or a pressure gauge. It just looks very dated. This is the default browser view. I think the progress one looks much nicer, and you can fall into this trap. You can say, oh, the progress one looks much nicer than this one. But to a search engine, it can mean something different. So sometimes we sort of have to do a little bit of work styling one to the other, but these two are quite similar. So it shows you how something is progression, such as a download, or if you're stepping a user through a multi-page form, this is the one to use. Let me just try and locate that. So I've got progress ID, and just in case it's not obvious, I've actually got some JavaScript that's just updating the values, and I've got a similar one on this one, just to make it slightly more dynamic. So that's moving up. One nice thing with the gauge is you can actually you've only got, I think, min and max on progress, but on gauges you can actually assign optimum, high, and max, so that it actually changes color, which I think is quite cute. I can't remember if it turns red on the final one. No, not this one. In another browser, it might turn red when it gets too high. So click on that link. There's a huge list of them. I've just included some that you may use. Something like a time. Oh, I forgot to finish this slide. My apologies. So putting time in a time element is quite helpful. And this one is like an optional break. So sometimes, if you've got Oops. That was an accident. So in an inline element, normally it's pretty good. You can rely on the browser to break on spaces or dashes. But sometimes you've got something like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, and you don't want it to break, say, supercar, and then lifragilistics on the next line. Like commercial television, you don't want the ads to be halfway through a scene. You'd like a scene to be finished. So I've actually got an optional break between supercalifragilistic and expialidocious. So it's one word on one line, but if there's a problem fitting it on the line, it will break it on that line. And as I said, there's lots more elements to look at. So that's like part one. So normally the lecturer, and certainly if I'm the lecturer, I'd give a little break at that point. So moving on to web forms now. Now web forms, because I've actually, I might just jump into the assignments. I was saying before last, I think in week 0, we usually had this really small assignment one, and then we had 2 larger assignments. But just finding, no matter how much advice I was giving students, assignment 2 is easy, assignment 3 is hard. Students were getting, were falling into the trap of finding that the final assignment was too big. So I have moved a little bit of assignment 2 and assignment 3, and a lot, not a lot, a large chunk of assignment, what was assignment 3, I've kept in assignment 3 and moved 15 marks into a 4th assignment, just so that the pacing is a little bit better. So in assignment 3, I might as well just pull this up. I am going to ask you to create a web form, and I'll give you a sort of example. So normally this would be in assignment 2, but it just was convenient to put this little part of assignment, the old assignment 2, into assignment 3. So if you're finding that assignment 2 was really easy to do, I'd strongly recommend you come to assignment 3 early and start building this, because it does reflect week 2 content. So now you may be looking at this video where the assignment's different. I'm not sure. I'm really just talking for 1937 cohort, so please make adjustments if this is the case. So I'm not sure. Let me just open assignment 2. I'm just going to check. I don't think I've got any sort of web form information in assignment 2. No, it's really just kind of like sections and making sure navigation, synopsis areas are working. And basically being creative, like putting together a website. So I'll just shut that down. So a web form, I'm hoping everyone's seen one. Hello, who are you? You've got drop-down boxes, text boxes, sometimes a like a select box, a drop-down box here. And also, sometimes you'll have something that will only allow you to put in a phone number. If you put in text there, it will glow red and say that's not legal. And also an email address field. And if you type something that's not an email, it will flag you as well. ITS have moved on quite a bit now. If you go to any My Tech support page, there'll be a little sort of help support so you can actually chat live to someone. And I strongly recommend you do this. Whenever I'm stuck, I just go to their page and chat to someone. The queries are often dealt with immediately. You don't have to sit on a problem and wait for, the fairies to fix the problems. So get online. And also, I think I said this last week, if you are having trouble and they say, oh, you need to talk to your tutor, it's not our job to help you, get a job number and also get a person's name just so that I can follow it up if they've been a bit too harsh. They're not always harsh, but sometimes they do fob off work onto me and I've got to fob it back on to them, and it does waste time. So when you're creating a form, so something like this form here, it needs to be in form tags. So, and we will look at this in more detail in TuteLab 3. And the form tag will have an action. So where is that? Where is all the information going to go? What method you're going to use? We'll look at that in a second. And the enc type, the default is pretty good, but sometimes you do need to change that. And then you put all the form elements, what you'll be presenting to the user to fill in. They'll go inside the form. So I'm going to talk about the method attributes. So the method get. So this is visible in the URL. So these are for like non-security related things. So when you're browsing Google Maps or something like that, it's actually sent in the URL. It's visible, so if someone's looking over the shoulder of the person using the website, it's visible. So please make sure you don't, ask for someone's username and password using the get method. And the other thing is it's limited to just just a few K of data, so there's not too much you can do there. But one of the advantages is you can actually save a search inside a browser history. So I don't know, let's just say you're on a dating website and you want to save your search. It is possible if they're using the get method. So you can bookmark that, not only the page, but also the search. So if you want to send anything secure, I suppose talking about dating websites probably is better to use Post. This is more secure. It's sent in the main body of the request. And as I talked about this last week, using HTTPS, that means it's encrypted. So anyone listening in with a stethoscope or Putin's magic earpiece, then or Trump or the CIA or Asia, then it's going to be hard work for them to work out what's being sent over the internet. And also, there's no theoretical limit. Obviously, there's a practical limit of data, but if you need more packets are generated. And also, the data is not cached or saved, so that's also a security thing. So I do make this point. Only use get method for non-secure data and things you might want to save, so map data, trip data, but use the post method for everything else. And this is why in the assignment I do ask you to use the post method when making bookings and entering in sensitive customer details. So this is an example. Form action mybank.com, method post, and all the details inside there. So this is a postal analogy. If anyone's old enough to remember postcards, when you're on holiday, you buy this picture and write on the back so anyone can read it. You couldn't really write too much. Really just say, I'm having a great time. I'm glad you're not here, that sort of thing. But if you want to send anything more secure, send it in an envelope. Obviously, an envelope's only as secure as the gum that's holding it down, but it's a slightly better and safer place. So I'm talking about the enc type. As I said, it's optional. The default is fine. This is the default one. So it just means spaces are encoded for safe transmission. If you ever see something like %20 or %35, that's the encoding, just to make sure that spaces are often trimmed or terminated. So this just means that safe transmission will be occurred and it will be decoded on the other end. If you are uploading files, which we won't be doing in this course, you will need to use the multi-part form data, and that will allow you to upload form data as well. Sorry, files. You'll be able to upload file data. I just got a little bit messed up with form there. And if you really need to, this is like dangerous, because if you've got spaces, it will be a problem. But sometimes you may want to send data as plain text. Oh, only spaces are encoded. So even spaces are encoded with plain text. That's good. I don't know. You may have a reason for wanting to do that. You can choose that encoding type, I guess. Okay, so that's the actual form tag. So inside the form tag, what we need is some elements. So the input element is basically what most elements are. They usually have a name. So anything that's transmitted to the server needs a name, and it also needs a value. So this will form part of a key value pair, something we will be talking about a lot in coming weeks. So you've got the name of the input and then the value of the input. Some other extra features, if you want something to be read-only, so you want the user to see that it's going to be transmitted, but you don't want it to be modified. And if you want something to be disabled, that stops the browser from sending the input. So read-only allows the data to be sent. Disabled just basically stops the data dead in its tracks. So we've got the input element. This is an example. Input type equals something, name equals something, value equals something. And got a bit of a try-it editor, so let's open this up. And I'll pop it in this window. So if I press submit, notice this one is disabled. So if I try and submit, first name is coming through, first name field is coming through, this one's coming through, but this fourth one, that is not coming through. Just type into this. So this is read only. I'm typing, but nothing's happening. Typing into here and nothing's happening. So I'll submit again. And the value is coming through each time. Notice this submit button has also got a name. So this is also an input. Its type is submit. Its name is submit, so that's what's coming through, and its value is submit also. And this is what's being sent, and also it's what is printed on the button as well. So I've got some things for you to do. So fill in and modify the fields, which I've done. Determine which fields are being sent, and I'd like you to play with the code as well. Have a play with this and see what happens. And every time you modify the code, you press try it, and that should break. Didn't break that time. Oh, that's because I'm modifying the instructions. So if I do something stupid like that, that now turns the submit button, because it doesn't know what type it is, it's turned it into a text field by default. So now I can type whatever I like, but now I can't submit, which is awkward. So not very successful. Good to play with, but not good. Now I've got to be careful around here. Some of these are live. So before HTML5, these types were available. So text input, If you wanted a password field, so like the above, but the user input is masked, use this one, input hidden. So in the assignment, I do ask you to put in some hidden fields. So it's not displayed to the user. The user has no idea it's there unless they view the source, but data is transmitted to the server. We'll be looking at radio and checkboxes in a moment. Hopefully you will recognize them. There's some that are round and some that are squared. And the radio buttons, you may select one and one only, and checkboxes, you may select 0 or multiple options. Input file, so that allows you to upload a file, which I said we won't be covering in this course, but you may have a need for that. And if you want an input that isn't actually an input, you can actually just have a plain button. And these are useful for just having there to trigger scripts. So you might have a calculator or something, but essentially it's no longer an input. If you give it a name, it will maybe be sent to the server, but it's sensible not to do that. This one is interesting. This, I wonder if there's a reset button here. No. This was popular in the 90s, and then people realized it was very dangerous having a reset button right next to the submit button, because what it does is it just resets the form back to their default values, which was a good idea before it was put into practice, and people don't really use it as much as they used to. Input submit, as I said, this was a submit button just before, and that is the button that basically sends the data to the server, or the processing script named in the action attribute. And this last one, this one's a very obscure one. I wasn't aware of this until a couple of years ago. It displays an image, but it behaves like a submit button. So so that's, you know, quite nice, I suppose. Just make it clear to visually impaired people that that is a submit button. But I'm going to show you something even better than this soon. So I've got some examples. This is a text field, so text there, and similar thing, you can put in password here, but I just want to make this 100% clear. The value, that's what the value is, and don't think it's hidden completely. It is. Actually, I'm really glad actually Chrome has updated. This doesn't update, which is nice. Normally with a field, let me just find this one. Oh, I think I'm looking at the wrong one, aren't I? Where is it? It's weird. Normally the value changes when I type. That's quite strange. That's not happening. Have I got that right? I have to. Okay, that's an update. I thought these changed when you entered something, but that's definitely not the case. Okay, so always getting surprised here. Oh yeah, this is the important one. There is a hidden field here, so I'll just show you that there is something there. So type equals hidden. There's the arrow there, and nothing to see here. But that input does exist. It's just not visible and to the viewer unless they click this paragraph tag here. Okay, so these are the radio and checkboxes. So male, female, other. So only allowed to pick one. And but let's just say, just using that dating website analogy, if you're looking for more than one thing, you can select as many as you like. Now, one practical thing, so if you are offering multiple options, and you want people to select more than one, make sure your name has got square brackets on it. So that means that will guarantee that your data will be sent as an array. So most browsers, if you don't put those square brackets in, only the first one or maybe the last one, I can't remember which, will be sent. So if you want an array of information, so an array of choices, an array of pizza toppings, pop in some square brackets. Otherwise, only one will get sent through. Naturally, if you've just got a checkbox that's for newsletter stuff, it's not so important. You only want one sent through. So type equals file. So if you have this, when you click on that, you'll get a pop-up asking you to pop in a file. So in Canvas, for example, submitting an assignment, type input type equals file, and this is the button option. So if you just want something to be a button for whatever reason, you can just say type equals button and it will work. Now these are the, if you like, the reset, submit, and image ones. So as I said, the reset button is not as popular these days. I haven't seen one in the wild for a while. When you click on it, it just erases all your input, which is quite frustrating. And here's another thing. You can actually have more than one submit button. So let's just say you're submitting data to a form and you want to have some way of detecting the different submit buttons. So one might be sign into your account and the other one might be to register and then sign in. So instead of having two forms which collect the exact same information, you can have one form and two different buttons, and then let the script processing script on the server work out what to do. I noticed I've got an extra space in here. I must remember to try and take that out. I'll say that again. I must try to remember to take that out and then edit. And here's the example of the image. So you can see it is a kind of button. So if you click anywhere there, it will act as a submit button. So the input, I should point out, the input is an empty element. So it ends like that. So there is no slash closing input. It's just a single element, and I like to put a slash there, even though we don't need to anymore with HTML5. But there are these paired elements. So a select box. So it can either be a drop-down box or a combo box. We'll have a look at some examples soon. They contain the name. So you name whatever the name is going on. Ugh. I'll say that again. So as I said, every input needs a name and a value. So the name attribute goes inside the select, and then all the values go inside the options. So you can have more than one option. And there's another thing called opt group, which we'll look at shortly, which also helps. So yeah, they're pretty good just for breaking up very long lists. A text area, so an input, I should point this out, it's only a single line of text. So this is an input type equals text, and it's a single line. If you want to have something for blogs or, write about your assignment issues here sort of thing, what you need is a text area, and that's a multi-line box. And you have the name here, but what actually goes inside here is actually the value. There's I think I did a bit of recording because I was wondering what would happen if you said value equals something. I was actually experimenting to see what was actually going on. More on that later, I guess. I might dig up that video and pop it into the playlist. Now, this one is very important. As I said, there's something better than this that's available. So when you have a paired button element, so you open the button and close the button tag, it's very similar to the button input type, but instead of just a single line of text, you can actually put HTML markup in there. So you can actually turn things into buttons. So much more sophisticated markup. The default state for, I don't know who made this decision, but the default state is a button is a submit button. So if you just say button, it is naturally a submit button. So if you want it to be just a plain button, you have to say type equals button, which I think someone had a bad day in the planning department when that decision was made. I'll talk more about that very soon. And another thing is field sets. In fact, I actually want you to use this. Have I got assignment 3 open? Yeah. This is what a field set looks like. So please, when you're designing this, make sure you don't try and create a div and use positional CSS to pop a label there. It's a field set. Okay, just honestly, just get a field set in there. It'll look like that. I'm just drawing this in, Google Draw. I didn't want to put in the code. I just want to draw what it looks like. So that's a field set, and it contains a couple of drop downs, which we'll see in a moment. So this is select box. Now you will notice that these are empty at the moment. So all I've done is I've just shown you what a select looks like and when there's nothing inside it. So the name is Santa's list. When you say size equals 3, it immediately stops being a drop-down list and becomes a combo box. And if you want the user to select more than one, just say multiple, and it immediately becomes a multiple select box. And you're not. I don't know a browser that allows you to have a drop-down box where you can select more than one. I think any select box that has multiple immediately becomes a combo box. So that's what they look like without options, and I've got some down here with options. So we've got option value equals something. Please make sure the first one is blank, and I think I even asked you to do this in assignment 3. And the first one by default is selected, but if you ever want one to be selected that's not at the top, you can put that selected keyword below, and it will pop that one in there. So this is working. It's nice to have a please select, just so that people understand that there's some instructions to select one of these options. If you don't have that please select option, the first option will be selected by default, which may not be ideal. And what I've got here is a combo box version. And if you hold down your Control or Alt button, you can select more than one when this is active. So this is the option with the opt group. So if you've got a lot of options, it's nice to have little opt groups. So I want all my naughty people grouped in one place and my nice people grouped in another. And again, because I want an array, I want this. And also, I want the combo box to be a bit bigger because there's more options there. So this is, if you like, the minimum size. If it gets any bigger, you get a scroll bar. You can sort of see the scroll bar is being popped in there. And Notice that I've selected Bob and Carol, so I don't have to select them, but I can deselect them. There's no problems there. And yeah, that sort of works quite well. Notice that I can't select nice and I can't select naughty, but I've disabled the whole naughty list. So I don't have to go through and uniquely disable all the naughty options. I can just make the whole group deselected, which is also quite helpful. So this is the text area, and I want to show you something. If you've been taught in Programming 1 or Introduction to Programming or Programming Techniques, Programming Fundamentals, those sort of courses, indentation plays a very big part. There's just one small problem with HTML. If you do the right thing with text areas, you get a tab character right here. You get a carriage return character. Let's see if can I trap that? Yeah, you get one at the bottom here. So see this carriage return character? It's right there, which is a problem. And you get these tabs where you've been indenting. So I've been faking this up, but I just wanted to show you that this is a bit of a problem. So what you'll find is you actually have to break with this nice indentation rule if you're putting default text inside a text area, but there's a much nicer way of putting placeholder text inside text-based elements, which we'll be looking at very soon. This gives you a minimum size, so 80 columns and 9 rows, but most browsers will let you. Oh, I thought that was the minimum size. Thank you for proving me a liar just before I opened my mouth. That's good. I wonder if that has. Let me just double check. I just want to make sure I'm doing that right. No, I'm definitely got 80 rows and columns. Interesting. Okay, I'll just close that off. I thought that would basically stop a user from making it too small, but that's not happening today. But it definitely makes it that big when you first open the page, which can be quite handy. I think the default is only 3 rows and maybe not that many columns, so often you will have to put in some defaults there. Now these are not pixels; these are actually rows or characters. So 80 characters long, 9 rows deep. So as I said, I was referring back to the input type equals button. Pretty boring, only text. So this is what a button looks like with just plain text in it. It doesn't look too different. Most browsers might have slightly more rounded corners on the input type equals button. I found that the button element generally has squarer corners, but if you don't like them, you can change them with CSS. It's not too big a problem. So as I said before, the default button type is a submit button. So if you want it to be something else, you need to say reset. And you can embed some HTML. And as you can see, hopefully this is slightly nicer than the one that was up here. There's no sort of outline unless you sort of select it. It's not obvious. And also the image, it goes right to the sides, whereas this, the image is inside the button. There's a little bit of padding around it, and you've also got some text, emergency, so that there's no doubt that that is definitely an emergency reset button. And this is the field set. So yeah, just linking this just in case anyone misses it. I do feel sad when people missings like this. So this is a field set, and you just pop in some fields that that sort of belong together. So in the assignment, you know, standard seats and first class seats, pop them in a field set group so that it's obvious which seats are which. And then you don't have to say first class adult, first class concession, and have huge amount of text in your web forms. Now, this is another thing. This is probably getting a bit out of date. I can't wait for the next election, so I can pop some new names in here. So I've got some options here. So one of the problems with mobility impaired users is the radio button is generally quite a small kind of target point. So you can actually turn labels into clickable. You can sort of link the radio button or checkbox with the label. So this means you can then click the label, and that just makes it easier for people with mobility issues, and also just nicer all around. There's nothing worse than trying to click that little tiny button. So how we link an input to its label, we give the button an ID, and then we say that this label is for, and we pop the ID in. So the browser then makes a connection that this label, when clicked, activates this radio button. So that works very good, very well. Gosh, how many more slides we got? So that's the traditional, everything I've shown you. That's basically what's been around for a long time. And then the working group realized we really need type equals email. That text input does a lot of work. So it'd be nice to say type equals email, so the browser can look after some of the email checking work as well. Type equals number, that means you'll only be allowed to enter numbers into a field, which is nice. And you can also pop in a range. So you can say that there's a minimum and a maximum, and also a step size. So they can be integers or even precision if you don't want someone entering in a number that's got too many decimal places. That can also work. Type equals URL. Sometimes you're entering in a URL, and this will, as long as you pop in some validating helpers, the browser will look after some basic validation and sort of flag these fields if they don't conform to the type that they are. Type equals color. This is really good. I want to spend more time looking at this in the Tutor lab, but this displays a full-on color palette. Depending on which browser you're using, it'll be slightly different. Something that would take you forever to code up using JavaScript. Type equals date, and we'll be looking at type equals month as well. That's a sort of other type of date, and you basically get a sort of a calendar thing. Again, something that would take a long time to code up if you were using an older browser. And type equals range, and I've got an example up here, so let me just click here. So this is a type equals range, and it just goes from one size to another. Oops, that just jumped me to somewhere else, and a list. And I'll be showing you that in a moment as well. So that goes with a data list. I do like this element, but I whenever I use it, it's always a little bit clunky, but I hope it gets tidied up soon. I am a fan of the data list element. Okay, so got some examples. So hopefully that's your student number appearing there. So we've got a URL. I think if I pop in some things here, okay, there's no validation checking, but you can program this to sort of glow a different color if there's a problem with the input. When you've got type equals number, you get these tiny buttons, which are just too tiny. But using CS, you can make them bigger. Note that there's no min or max, so it started off at 10, but I've got pretty much free range to enter in any number I like. And I'll leave that alone. This is the type equals color. Oh, thank you for popping it up on that window. So, and as you move it around, the color changes. You know, again, something you don't need to code up because Chrome's done all that for you. This is the date of birth. Quite good. You've got a default thing if you need to go back in time. Oh, too far? Ah. Okay. Oh, no, I was just scrolling too fast. So you can go back forever, I'm guessing. Could be a problem. And here's that range element I was talking about before. So this is the data list, which is really handy. It doubles up. And if you're using Firefox, it does something different. I think Safari as well. So I don't think there's any sort of strict standard about what is supposed to be displayed, which is a bit of a problem. But generally, this is what you display to a human, and this is what is sent to the to the computer, the server. And so you may want to just use value. You may want to leave that blank. As I said, this is almost right. I think whoever made the decision to release this hadn't quite got it underway. But the nice thing is it combines the drop-down box with text input. So if I type in A, it'll only show me options with the A. So if I then typed L, I've only got Alice. So you can imagine if this was in Canvas and a marker was looking for student numbers, they could just type in 1 or 2 numbers from a student ID and it might find the right student in a group of 100 students. So very nice. I still think this element needs a little bit of work though. Additional inputs now, placeholder text. I was saying this is very useful. This places text in an empty text box or text area. And as soon as you start typing, that placeholder text goes away. So you don't need to put text inside a text field or a text area and then write JavaScript to delete it. You can use the placeholder attribute in there. Autocomplete. I'm having a lot of trouble with this tag. Sorry, this attribute. And Chrome has started doing autocomplete even on elements where I don't have autocomplete enabled, as you could probably see with those text things I had before. So it's a little bit frustrating. I hope Chrome tidies that up very soon. But obviously, you don't want someone's username and passwords appearing in boxes, especially when you're doing a video recording on YouTube. But Chrome, I don't know, Chrome is ignoring the autocomplete equals false, which is annoying me at the moment. But this is, in theory, how it's supposed to work. If a field needs input, you can't leave it blank. Put in required, just required, and it'll usually pop up it just provides a pop-up warning if it's left blank. And pattern will be covering that when we cover regular expressions. But you might like to get started if you want to jump a little bit ahead. And you can program that so it gives you some more accurate information about the problems. And for date and number elements, you can provide a minimum and a maximum, and it will make sure that input between those ranges are clipped. And step, I wasn't aware for date fields. I hope I didn't just do a copy paste thing there. I know it's definitely for numbers. So if you just want the even numbers or odd numbers, I think I've got an example coming up. You can say step equals 2, or if you've got precision that you're allowed 0.1, you can have a smaller step size. The default is 1, as we saw before. So here's the placeholder. See what I mean? This autocomplete, annoying me. Oh, actually, I think I've got these programmed. Yes. I don't know what's going on. This used to work, but a version of Chrome, it's just started doing this. It's so frustrating. I'll just say false. Maybe false works. No, it's not working. Maybe in a different browser this will work, but Chrome for some reason is ignoring this, which is quite frustrating. But that's the one where it is allowed. Manage. Pay attention. Not today. Okay, so this is the placeholder. So if I leave that blank, please fill in this field, and that's because the required attribute is catching. Now let's just say I pop in Trevor and I test the field. Oops. Your first name must be Steve. Because the pattern is Steve, so it must be S-T-E-V-E. No other names are allowed, not even Stephen. Look, Steve is fine, but as soon as you're Stephen, it's bad. Pick a number, so I'm going to go down, can't go down, can go up, but not past 10. This one, I can go up by odd numbers, but no. Now I can type 131. I can't go up. As soon as I go down, it goes back in normal range. But I just want to make a point. I can go to 131, press test, and then it will say, nope, not allowed that. It has to be 111. And if I enter in 100, it says the two nearest values are 99 and 101. So again, that would take a lot of programming, not required. It's all hidden away. Oops, I'll let you do that. And slides we got left? Just 2 more. Okay, now this is very important. And we will definitely be looking at this in the JavaScript and PHP areas. So we also need to make a decision, you know, when you're collecting data from a user, you need to make a decision on what are you trusting the user to supply. So so I've got an example here, you know, the number of products or services that you're supplying. So if a client is lying about how many shoes they want, they'll just be ordering more. It's not really an issue, but you've got to think about honest users. So having min and max is a good idea to pop in reasonable ranges so that users don't make accidental mistakes. So there are 2 things. There's dishonest users and then there are honest users. So you need to look after both. One, to stop the dishonest users from cheating and the honest users from making genuine mistakes. So one thing, you know, so you can't order 1.5 seats or cars, for example. Now, product service codes, this is how most of the internet works. You supply the product code, it lines up with an item in their warehouse, and that item is then shipped to you. So if they're cheating, then they'll be ordering something else, or they'll be ordering something that doesn't exist. So one way you can protect honest users is to put that in a hidden field. And in the assignment, I am looking for you to put in some hidden fields so the users don't make the mistake of selecting a movie that's not playing at a particular time. More on that later. So product service description. This is not really something you need to submit to the server. And if you've got a dishonest user, they may say, oh, well, that's what it said when I submitted the order. So just have a think about that. What do you need in order to process an order? You don't need to submit this product service description. If you submit the ID of the product, then the server can go and look that up on the server side. And also, as you can see, I can right-click, inspect an element, and say, you know, I can change it to say something. Yes, you know, the client is owed $1,000. You know, oh, look, I'm taking a screenshot of this web page that says you owe me $1,000. That's okay if it's just a screenshot of the web page, but if it turns up on any official documentation like an order, the client is owed $1,000 on the invoice. That's not a good idea. So this is something you probably wouldn't want to submit. Products and service price. Yeah, these are what the I'm trying to demonstrate here. It's good that the client knows what the price is when they're shopping, you know, so they know when they're adding items to the cart, you know, they know how much you're going to pay. But you wouldn't trust, and I hope you understand that the machine that modern day supermarkets use is linked to the server. It doesn't actually look at the prices that are stuck on the tins and packets anymore. They used to be, but they worked out that clients were really sneaky. They peel off the price tags and put different price tags on the products. So in a website, you don't want to be submitting the price of products. You just want to submit what the products are. So very easy trap to fall into. And marketers will be testing to see whether they can buy cheap products from your website. So watch out for that. So just keep thinking, you know, what's the worst that a dishonest client could do, and adjust accordingly. Now I'm going to make a comment about HTML5 have made some changes to the form element. We no longer have to put our elements inside the form tag. We can actually have them in different places. And just from a housekeeping point of view, I haven't really found a need to sort of take advantage of this feature. But if you're interested in playing around with this, you know, you have your form element in one place, and then you can put your inputs anywhere else. And as long as you say which form they belong to, and sometimes they can belong to more than one form. So, you know, the name and password, for example, they could belong to register and login forms. And the advantage with this system is you can actually have different, you know, different actions. So you can be submitting the data to different scripts, but you don't need to have two sets of input fields. So this was realized, you know, this was a thing. This could be handy, but I'm not seeing any major uptake of this in the real world. So it might be one of these, hey, wouldn't it be cool to things, but it's not. I'm not really seeing it being a practical thing. It's almost like the reset button in some ways, I think. A great idea, but not being really used. Who knows? Things may change. People may work out that this is possible, but yeah, I'm not seeing too much of a change. So okay, so that's basically the end of this lecture, and I'm pretty much guaranteed this is over an hour. I think this one went a little longer. So once you finish watching this, the material, as I said, is in Tute and Lab 3. But what I'd like you to do is maybe read up on this in advance and bring any questions to the second chat, even though we're covering the previous week's Tute and Lab in week 2. But I think it's always good to be a little bit ahead with the lecture, so you can ask me questions about the lecture. And then the following week, we then concentrate on the Tute and Lab materials. So goodbye for the moment, and I hope to see you in the chat this coming week.